Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for Psi Chi's webinar today. I'm Stephanie Maurice Beeson from Psi Chi headquarters, and I'm so excited to be able to welcome you to hear from some wonderful Psi Chi alumni members about their unique career journeys. I am going to briefly introduce today's panelists, and I'll address a couple of housekeeping issues before passing it over to our speakers to share with you about their education and career journeys. As the International Psychology Honor Society, Psi Chi supports our members to study and share psychology in ways that further our understanding, deepen meaningful connections with others, and lead to healthier lives. In service of that mission, we are grateful to be able to host this webinar on career journeys, and we hope it will be helpful to you. Today, we are excited to bring you three amazing panelists. We have Devika Jutagir, PhD, Assistant Attending Psychologist at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. DeMonta V. Whiting, Licensed Marriage and Family Therapist, Founder and CEO of Wedding, Marriage, and Family Therapy Incorporated. Itzel Yagual, Identity Strategist, IO Consultant, and Founder of The Unfolding Room. You can hear they each have a lot of expertise and a lot of great experiences to share. So I'm really, really grateful that they're each here and willing to share their insights with you and all of us today. We're recording this webinar and we will post it on our website, probably behind the member login in case you need to leave early or if you would like to view it again in the future or share it with your friends. The audience will remain muted for the presentation, but we do want to take a period for Q&A towards the end. So if you have any questions for the panelists, as they come up throughout the panel, please go ahead and enter them into the Q&A feature, and we'll leave a lot of time at the end to address the questions. And anybody who's still on at the time the webinar ends, we'll be giving away 3 $10 gift cards. So if you're still here, you'll be eligible to receive a gift card. So now I'd really like to pass it over to the panelists to briefly introduce themselves to you and just share a little bit about what they're doing now and when they joined Psi Chi and just a little bit more about themselves. And then I have quite a few questions that we'll go over with all of them. So Itzel, would you mind starting us off with introducing yourself?
Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Yes? Because I'm not hearing. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Itzel Yagual, and I am an identity strategist, industrial organizational psychology practitioner, and also the founder of the Unfolding Room. So my work lives at the intersection of psychology, leadership, and organizational systems. What I do is I help organizations and leaders redesign their workplaces so that people, especially neurodivergent, culturally complex women, can thrive without erasing who they are. So what does that mean? That means that leadership development, it involves culture audits, workforce strategy, and translating research into practices that make workplaces inclusive, sustainable, but also future ready. Academically, I'm currently completing my PhD in industrial and organizational psychology at Capella University. My dissertation focuses on how Latino women work in STEM and how they navigate self-efficacy and work-life balance in remote roles. I also collaborate with universities on research about Latinos with autism, helping them shape more culturally responsive systems. With that in mind, I'm also neurodivergent. I'm a woman of color, a spouse to a combat veteran, and a mom to a 19-year-old who is also neurodivergent. My work is deeply personal and deeply applied. And when I'm not consulting or writing, you can usually find me reading about tech trends or chasing my 2 French bulldogs during their Zoomy times. I joined Psi Chi in 2020, and I'm grateful to be here connecting with so many future psychologists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Itzel. DeMonta, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I'll go next. My name is DeMonta Whiting. I am a licensed psychotherapist and leadership coach based in Los Angeles, California. I typically work with high-achieving professional men who struggle with work-life balance issues, and I help them develop strategies to prevent burnout and to create more sustainable success in their personal and professional lives. I've been in Psi Chi since 2015, and I graduated from Pepperdine University.
Thank you so much, DeMonta. Devika.
Hi, as you introduced me before, I'm an assistant attending psychologist on the faculty at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. So I provide psychotherapy to people who've been diagnosed with cancer, to help them cope with the diagnosis or perhaps to make health behavior changes, to improve their health after the cancer diagnosis. And then I also conduct research to help improve mental and physical health outcomes for patients after a cancer diagnosis. So I focus on designing interventions. And I earned a bachelor's degree from Duke University, where I joined Psych in the second semester of my junior year. And I have a master's degree and a PhD in clinical psychology with a specialty in clinical health psychology from the University of Miami.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you. And now I will ask our first official question. What initially drew you to study psychology and then drew you to your current field and role? And Devika, I'll ask you to start first, and then the others, if you want to just jump in once Devika is done.
Sure. When I got to college, I took classes in a lot of different areas to find out what I would be interested in. And I ultimately realized that what interested me most about each class had to do with behavior. So after that realization, I decided to major in psychology. And I had had a longstanding interest in how psychological stress can affect physical health. So I learned about the field of health psychology while I was at Duke. I took some courses in that area, and I would say that's what led me to my current career.
I can jump in. Uh, I would say I grew up in a pretty bad neighborhood years and years ago, and I would say it was not a very emotionally safe household and not physically safe neighborhood. And so what I've learned early on is how to navigate certain situations and how to uh, how do you say understand different personalities so that I can create safety in those types of environments. I think I got pretty good over time. And then as I got into college, I was originally a Spanish major, but I took some psych courses. And the more psych courses that I took, the more I realized I liked psychology a lot better. And so by the end of my sophomore year, I just completely switched to psychology, and I've been studying that ever since. So.
Oh, Itzel, you're muted.
You did. Yeah, so originally I started not actually in psychology. I went into urban studies, but I was really wanting to explore and look at, human behavior, just in general, as coming as an immigrant to the United States. It was very important for me to, I'm like looking at people and seeing, the behaviors are very different. And I went to school. I did take a couple of college courses about psychology, semiotics, human behavior, also gender, what does that look like psychologically in the media? And after I graduated from University of Washington, I got into social services. And within those workplaces, I became really fascinated about just pretty much how everyone worked and the retention and the hiring and training and how a lot of it was very flawed when it came to nonprofits. So I became really drawn to psychology at that point in my life, seeing, how retention and hiring and onboarding was such an issue for nonprofit fields. And so I decided, what, like, I want to help people thrive. I want to fix the workplace. And that's what kind of brought me to studying IO psychology. And, I kind of had this feeling of like, identity and culture and just seeing all those kind of invisible expectations that kind of shape success. And so that drew me to really dive in a little bit more into IO psychology, neurodivergence. And IO psychology today has done it for me because it really connects, the individual, the well-being, the organizational systems. And so that behavior is a function of both, the person and their environment, which really captures my values and the lens. So, I love, everyone's background. And for me, it was about fixing, broken structures. And so I'm really, it really drove my career and interest in redesigning those structures so people can kind of show it fully for themselves.
Thank you, everyone. It's so cool and interesting to hear how, there's different ways to get started and enter into the field, but it sounds like for each of you and for myself as well, it was about, wait a second, people are acting interesting. The brain is interesting. What are we going to do about this? So I'm really grateful to you each for sharing that. Next question, and DeMonta, I'll ask you to address this one first. What aspects of your psychology education have been most valuable in your career?
Yeah, it was in my pre-practicum class. I think it was my second year in grad school. And my professor asked us a question. He said, raise your hand if you're in a relationship. And I think about 90% of the class raised their hand. And then he said, I guarantee you by the end of this program, at least 75% of you will be out of those relationships. And it hit me because I was feeling the kind of way about the relationship I was in. But what he was trying to teach us was that for this to work, to be in this field, to do this work, and for you to have success with the people that you're working with, you're going to have to do some work on yourself. And as you start doing work on yourself, you're going to start realizing why you do the things that you do and why you engage in the relationships you engage with and why you do the type of jobs that you do. And if you're really honest with yourself and you really want to have success in this field, well, you're going to have to be honest with yourself. You're going to start making changes, just like your clients are going to make changes. And those changes may affect what's currently going on in your life. And so for me, it was once I realized, okay, this is why I'm in this relationship. And this is not very healthy for me. I made some changes there, and I made some changes in my work environment. I made a lot of those changes. And so I found with that said that the more work you do on yourself, the more success you're going to have in this field.
Who would like to jump in there? Thank you, DeMonta. That's really, really powerful. Somebody said in the chat, very true and very powerful. Devika, Itzel?
Yeah, I think my answer would have to do is similar in the sense of that I think one of the most valuable things was really working on some soft skills. Certainly, my psychology education was important in terms of teaching me certain technical skills that I need when working with patients or, when doing research projects. But I think one experience that stands out to me is that I decided to do an honors thesis my senior year, and it was a big commitment. And there were times when I thought, I have a lot going on senior year, maybe I should just do an independent study instead of, putting in all of the time and work to do the thesis. But what I learned from sticking with that was the importance of seeing a project through to the end and what it took in order to see it all the way through. And I think that this career path requires a lot of persistence and a lot of taking on projects that take a while to see all the way through. So I think that some of the soft skills that I got from committing to that, as I said, were just as value as the technical skills. So I'm glad that I took that on.
Yeah, I think for me, the most valuable aspect of my psychology education is a couple of things. I agree 100% with what DeMonta had stated. And I think for me, the revelation was actually when I took advanced qualitative studies course and learning really just how to capture, lived experiences, and, the cultural component to it. I think sometimes a lot of the systems in place are so fixed, and that we might get focused on, really trying to fix and not really, accepting of, other things that might be happening culturally or systemically to someone. And I think that really has, opened my mind and really helped me hone in on those skill sets, to really focus on this IO psychology path of mine, because I'm able to like analyze systems, challenge norms, and, at the same time, being someone who is neurodivergent, you have certain specific way of thinking, and systems that aren't necessarily supportive to you. So I say this, with being very proud in the sense that, owning who you are, understanding what works for you, and knowing that your path isn't always going to be linear, and that pivots are okay. I think that helped me a lot during the process of getting me to where I am today.
Wonderful responses, everyone. Oh my goodness, so much to learn from each of you. Just even with those answers, thank you so much. I'm just like sitting here reflecting on what you each shared. To go to the next question, Itzel, if you wouldn't mind addressing this one first, what would you say are the key skills or qualifications needed to succeed in your particular field? Oh, you're muted.
I think definitely one of the biggest ones, and I think specifically where we are headed today with so much technological advancements, critical thinking, um, definitely communication and social skills, and I would have to say capacity awareness. So with critical thinking, that for me is, analyzing, how culture, power, and structure can shape behavior. And I will reference some theories here, classic with Lewin, classic with Shine. The environment and the invisible cultural codes matter, particularly to this day and age when it comes to communication, translating evidence-based insights into strategies that leaders can actually implement. And then when I say capacity awareness, I think that is very universal in the sense, not just for yourself as a scholar practitioner, but also with whom you're servicing. So, I use a lot of the frameworks having to do with job demands, resources model, and that often requires to design work that's sustainable, right? So it's about designing the systems that make it possible for people to thrive. And, in consideration with all the technological demands, I would have to say, certainly be tech focused. Obviously, don't let it make it as a supplement. I love AI. I love, technological advancements. So I think we have to be aware of the uses of that and also being ethical with it.
I guess I could jump in. I could jump in here. Um, you said that what were the key skills, right, or qualifications needed?
Yep.
I think we all know that you need empathy and you need compassion to do this type of work. I think that's one thing I will say this is that a lot of us that go into the field of psychotherapy have a tendency to be people pleasers. We kind of run high in that. And the problem with that can be that we tend to put other people's needs above our own. And it's very easy to get burnt out in this field. And so I don't know if it's a trauma response or something that I've learned over the years is that I have to be very good at detaching from what's going on with my client. So my job is to help them, right, as much as I can, but I have to be able to limit that to when I'm working with them and not to take a lot of that stuff home with me, right? So for example, I had a client, I want to say about 6 months ago, that I've been working with for about 2 or 3 years, died from cancer, right? And I found out before we were supposed to have a session, and so I couldn't do the session because his wife contacted me, and I had a session right after that. If I were to take on all that feelings that I had in that moment, I couldn't do the session with that next client. I couldn't be able to be there fully. And so there's a part of it, but you have to really be able to detach your feelings about certain things, certain aspects of what you're doing, so you can focus on what you're doing. And then when I had time to myself, now I can grieve about what happened with my client. But I find that when I was in school, the people who didn't do too well were the people who took on everyone's problems immediately and could not seem to let them go. If you do that, you're going to have really difficulty not burning out in this field.
I agree with that. I think something that comes to mind for me, I alluded to already, it's persistence. This field requires a lot of applications to be successful. Over the course of my career, I had to apply for different fellowships, research opportunities, jobs, graduate school, submitting manuscripts for publication, submitting grant applications. And so it's incredibly important to be able to persist through the rejections, which are inevitable. I do want to emphasize that I think persistence is something that you can develop over time. You get used to the rejections and you start to accumulate more successes, which kind of reinforces, the persistence in the field. So I would just say to not be discouraged if you do experience some early rejections, and if you're really interested in this field, then keep trying, and you can find your way. And I guess I'll put in a plug. You can practice by applying for some of the Psi Chi grants and scholarships that they offer. You might be able to get one, which is really exciting. And if you don't get one, then you sort of start to get used to this process of what it's like to experience rejection a bit.
Thank you, everyone. Wow. There's a couple things that I just want to make sure. Write this down or put this in your notes app or something, everyone.
I wanted to add
Oh,
something,
go ahead,
if I
Itzel.
may. If you're neurodivergent, just know that there is a ton of resources out there. So I myself am autistic and I have ADHD and complex PTSD, so I'm very familiar how to navigate that avenue. And for anyone who's experienced rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria, these things can all be compounded. And if you do not have the right resources and support, you may resort into masking, which is not healthy. So definitely, there's a ton of resources out there like the Neurodiversity Foundation. They actually have what's called the Program Research Fellows, which they connect you to different research opportunities. And there's a ton. So if any of you, definitely want to connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free to do so. I'm more than happy to share those resources.
Thank you so much, Itzel. And if you want to put any links to those in the chat, I'm sure that would be helpful too. So yes, just to repeat what everybody said just now, I think this is extremely helpful advice that I want everybody to remember. Be persistent, build persistence in whatever way you need to and what makes sense for you with the resources that you need to take advantage of. Be aware of your capacity. Care for yourself before caring for others. Whew, we can be done now. That's everything you really need to know. No, but Devika, if you would not mind, and this you've each already touched on some of these answers to this question, but what advice would you give to students considering a similar career path to yours?
Yeah, I think that using and making connections is really critical in this career path. I would say that pursuing a clinical psychology PhD, it's not the most common career path, and it's not always easy to get advice about how to put together a competitive application and position yourself for graduate school. Um, so it really requires getting guidance from professors, from current graduate students, and even from your peers who are navigating the same process. It's important to have these people look over your CV and look over your personal statement and do a mock interview with you. For example, these are just not things I think that you can figure out on your own generally. It's also really helpful to ask these kinds of people about what they know about the graduate programs that you're interested in and the faculty members that you'd like to work with. And I think one thing that helps me to remember to take advantage of these opportunities are that all these people have been through this process too, or are going through it too. They asked other people these kinds of questions, and they expect that they're going to be approached by other people. And in fact, they're usually really glad to have the opportunity to pay it forward and advise people the way that they got a lot of advice. Um, I I can put some links in the chat too about some resources that exist for people to get feedback, for example, on a personal statement or to do a mock interview. These are sort of formal programs that you can apply to online if you don't have any, if you don't know any people who've been through this process or don't have a good support system at your school. I think these are fantastic resources, and I encourage taking advantage of them.
I can jump in. I guess some advice that I would give students considering a similar career path. I think first I would say decide which path you want. So for example, if you want to do more the medical side, you might want to be a psychiatrist. If you want to do more of the research side, then you want to do psychology, become a psychologist. If you want to do, or if you want to do more of the one-on-one or group therapy or family therapy, you want to be either a therapist or a clinical psychologist. Usually those are the ones. Or PsyD, that's another program you can do. But knowing which path you want to go down would help you to determine what classes you need to take and what school you want to attend. I think the other part I would say is that in my field, there's not a lot of, I want to say financial support. There's not a lot of resources. There are resources, but you have to do the work. But if you start going down this path and it feels right, don't worry about how much money you make out the gate. So for example, my background is marriage and family therapy, right? And so going to the field, we don't typically get paid as much as psychologists. Definitely don't get paid as much as psychiatrists. However, if you do well enough in this field, there are ways to be able to profit from what you do. If it feels right, I would say go for it, regardless. However, if you tend, like I said earlier, if you tend to get emotionally attached to a lot of different things, it may not be so good for you because it can be overwhelming. And I've seen a lot of therapists get burnt out very easily. And then doing that process, the licensing process, going from associate to licensed therapist, that's where we tend to lose half of us. So if it feels right, go for it. If it starts feeling overwhelming and you're not sure if it's the path that you should go down, maybe it might not be the path for you.
So I'm going to chime in. I would say, definitely if you're considering, IO psychology or, any of the paths here, I mean, certainly if you're neurodivergent, person who comes from many intersections, definitely be curious. Certainly be connected. Definitely network with, people who have gone through the process so that they can either coach you or be a mentor. There are a lot of good resources and organizations that will help, connect neurodivergent folks, as well as, if you're somebody who has a military background, I can chime in on that because, like I said, I'm a military spouse and also a caregiver. So there's plenty of programs and resources that will help you connect if you're someone who's trying to pivot, or if you're somebody who's just starting out and are like, hey, I want to go into this field. And the panel provided great advice as far as, connecting with mentors, and certainly and at the same time, be open to, exploring those informational interviews, because I think those are really important to give you a view of, well, what does that really look like? Because initially you might jump in and say, this is what I want to do. And then down the road, like, this is not what I want to do, right? And I myself am one of those people that I went through, college trying to figure out what is it that I want to do. I didn't have a straight linear path, and that's okay. We all have our time to figure out and say, hey, this is exactly what I want to do. But certainly, network, connect with people that can provide you that support and that capacity, and also someone who's been through the process so that they can guide you on what's the next steps.
Thank you so much, everyone. That's really, really helpful from your various perspectives. And I will also, of course, say Psych has a lot of resources on our website. I have found, just in chatting with students and things like that, that the different APA divisions are very helpful. A lot of them have grants and mentorship opportunities and things like that, for students in various tracks. I think there's one for IO, there's one for marriage and family therapy, there's one couple for clinical. So I think those are good, really good resources too. And APA has some student resources as well. We have a couple of grants, fellowships in partnership with them. So anyways, just a little plug about that. And I also meant to mention at the beginning, this just as another path, if anybody wants to reach out to me. I started in psychology with my undergrad, and I ended up getting my master's in social work and going into nonprofit management. So if anybody has curiosity about that, I'd be happy to talk to you about that too. I'm just trying to give a broad, perspective. There's lots of ways that we can all, pursue our love for psychology in lots of different ways. And I'll also mention that we're going to be having another one of these panels in February, so there's going to be even more perspectives to come. We're not done. I just had to say that right now. DeMonta, if you wouldn't mind starting this one off, are there common misconceptions about your field that you'd like to address?
Yeah, I think the first one that's top of mind is that therapists don't tend to make as much financially as psychologists. And so a lot of people go down that route because they think, well, you get funding through school. And then if you decide to open a practice, you can also do pretty well. However, my program, we had a 2-year, what was it called? Master's of Psychology program. And after that program, you could then apply to go to a doctorate program. Well, we had a 3-year Master's in Clinical Psychology program. And from that program, it's a terminal degree. So after that program, you can start getting your hours and start working immediately. And the difference between a therapist who has completed the terminal program and has started their own private practice, and a psychologist who's finishing their program and they're working for an agency or starting their private practice, it's not a lot, because I have to market my business like you have to market your business. And depending on how well I do, I can get just as many clients as someone else who might have a higher education than I do. I would say that also here in California, I know that with a lot of LMFTs, the belief is that you have to have a doctorate in order to teach at universities. And a lot of my professors at Pepperdine were also LMFTs. They weren't necessarily doctors. Some of them were, but not all of them. And so that misconception is also not true. So.
Itzel, Devika?
There are so many misconceptions about psychology. It's hard to choose. One thing I would say is that we think of psychologists as doing talk therapy, and that is certainly a big part of what I do. But there's also a lot of writing in what I do. So I have to write notes after every visit. Patients ask for letters to be written. If I were a neuropsychologist, I'd be writing reports about the assessments that I did. Um, and because I'm also a researcher, I write grant applications, I write IRB protocols, I write manuscripts for publication, and I'm constantly at my desk writing emails all day long. So I think that's just something to consider in terms of what you like doing on a day-to-day basis or what skills you might want to work on building if you want to pursue this path.
Yeah, I think I agree with what everyone stated because I think, a lot of times psychology is viewed as just the traditional, accepted common roles, right? And for me, from the branch of IO psychology, we're kind of looked at as sometimes like not real psychology. So we deal with a lot of that, and some people think that it's just, like HR, and that's not even close. So, IO is an applied science. We do geek out on like humans and how they function, right? And we do redesign the systems. So, we do help to guide teams. We help to guide leadership, training, onboarding, and kind of just really help decode some of the workplace issues. I think another big misconception is that, like DeMonta had mentioned, is that things only happen in therapy rooms. Um, and honestly, like workplaces are, and I'm sure you guys can agree, are some of the most psychologically intense spaces people will ever experience. With what power dynamics, identity, belonging, burnout, I mean, all of it. So, IO psychologists are real people. They're trained to understand motivation, identity, power, and culture. And their jobs focus on building systems that support people before they actually hit the crisis. So yes, we are out here designing healthier, workplaces, and so on. And, when I first started, I didn't really, realize how much of like my lived experience and being neurodivergent and being a woman of color, how constantly I'd be navigating those systems. And that in itself is data. So when you have all those intersections and, and you don't look at those things, those patterns are missed. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love, IO psychology, because we're understanding those systems that support people in these scenarios.
Thank you so much, everyone. Yes, like Devika said, there's quite a few misconceptions that we each in our own kind of areas of expertise can work to tear down and reframe for folks. It's super, super interesting. Thank you, everyone, so much. We have just one more question for the panelists, and then we will do some Q&A. And I do see some questions in the chat as well as in the Q&A box, and I also have some from folks from before the webinar started. So Itzel, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off with this question, what emerging trends or opportunities do you see in your profession?
Yeah, so definitely currently there's like two big shifts, and one of them being neurodiversity at work. I think at this point, despite, the political sphere and the rhetoric that's going on, organizations are really realizing how neurodiversity talent isn't enough, right? So they are in need of systems that, don't force masking and create psychological safety. And also, the cultural change. The other part of it, I think, is, the work-life boundary design. Um, the JDR model is huge. So what I'm seeing is, definitely imagining more sustainable leadership, and capacity and what that looks like. So I think, and then at the same time, how do we integrate technology in it? So there's some definite huge trends as far as that is concerned within IO psychology and where that's going.
I would say that one of the emerging trends right now is I think AI has been amazing. I also struggle with ADHD. And so the hardest part of my job has always been the note taking and getting everything accurate and making sure that it's approved by insurance companies. And like Devika was saying, there's a lot. The other side of therapy is note taking, and it takes up a lot of time. If you're doing, what it could be like, what, 30 to 40% of your time, it's just the note taking alone. And so with AI, obviously doing it ethically, it's like that, right? And so I can focus on just being a therapist, and that's for the longest time, that was the biggest hump for me. And now it's just like, it's no longer a hump, you know, just makes things a lot easier.
I think there's a couple of interesting trends. One is that historically you could only see patients located in a state where you were licensed. Um, and of course, it would be very difficult to get licensed in all 50 states. So that made mobility for psychologists challenging. There's a lot more movement now towards reciprocity and different arrangements in different states, so that you don't have to get licensed in every state in order to see patients. So I think that's very helpful, and also it just means people in different states have access to specialists in other states, which I think is a great thing for our field. Um, Technology, of course, we don't know exactly what shape this is going to take in our field in the longer term. I think that whether you're really enthusiastic about technology or whether you're concerned about it, it's important for you to be involved to help shape, where this is going to go. Um, I will say that I have found a psychology PhD to be quite versatile. So when I think back on my graduate school cohort, there are some people who have a private practice. There are some people in an academic medical center like me doing clinical work and research. There are some people at universities teaching. There are people who are user researchers at tech companies. There's someone who's a partner in a venture capital organization. There are people who work for the federal government in different capacities. So I do think that people can, with this, who've gone down this career path, can pivot based on how the environment that we're in changes. I don't know that the clinical psychology PhD was the most direct route to some of the paths that I mentioned, but nevertheless, I think you do have options at the end if things change or you decide that your interests change. So I find that to be reassuring.
Thank you so much. Oh, okay. And now we have lots of questions. So I will read the questions out loud for the recording and for folks. And then if everyone wouldn't mind, just maybe we can, just whoever feels like they want to answer it right away, if you could just like lead off, and then if anybody else wants to add anything, but everybody doesn't, each of you don't have to answer everyone, if that makes sense, because there are quite a few. So let's try to get through as many as we can in the next 10 minutes or so. First one from the chat I'd like to address. Okay, do you happen to have any advice or resources for students who primarily are online students working full-time and may not have a huge amount of connections to apply for a master's program?
Wait, say that one more time.
This person is primarily online, working full-time, feels like they might not have a lot of connections to help them get into a master's program.
So my program, I went to Pepperdine, and I went to my program was for people who are currently working. I'm based in LA, but my job was back in DC. So I was working from 10 to 3 and going to school from like, what was it, 7 to 10, right? But after COVID, a lot of that stuff switched to online, right? And there's a lot of programs in different parts of the country where it's catered to people who are currently working and can't be there full time. It can't be on campus. So you just have to find out what's available where you are.
Thank you. And yeah, it sounds like the person who put in that question might want to connect with you, DeMonta, just for more.
Yeah. How do you give them? You can give them my website address.
Okay.
I don't know if I
Yeah,
can put it in the chat.
I'll put everybody's like website or
Yeah.
preferred contact in the resources email that I'll send out afterwards with the
Okay.
recording. Anybody else have anything on that, or should I go on to the next? Alrighty. Okay. So a couple, there's quite a little bit of overlap in some of these. So I'll read this one because I think a lot of this is relevant to a lot of these questions. Somebody's applying to get their master's in art therapy, wondering if there's any advice to help stand out in my application in order to be selected as a graduate student.
Wait, so are you applying for an art therapy program? Is
Mhm.
that what you're saying? Because I think that I didn't even know those existed. I just thought that like, just therapy program. But I wouldn't know what to tell you. Because I don't know if it's like you give good artwork or is it like have you
Yeah,
done any work prior to this?
I
Like
think,
I've had
yeah.
people come to me, some mentees come to me before, and the question they ask is, how can I make my application stand out compared to someone else's?
Yeah.
And should I have done anything prior to this so that I can stand out compared to other people? Um, I didn't do anything special. I went to undergrad, right? I did the programs. I did like experiments that we had in psychology classes. I've done papers that we had to do. Those were the things that I turned in. I don't know if it's I don't know if you had any art classes, art psychology in undergrad that you can then apply that stuff to, like a grad school program. That might be relevant.
I,
Go ahead.
I was going to agree with that because I was going to say there's so many different, like you alluded to before, there's so many different routes you can take to becoming a therapist that I think in an essay like this, it's really important to say why you want to do a master's in art therapy specifically. What is it about that type of training and the type of work that you would want to do that is unique? So in so many of these statements, I think people write about wanting to help people or wanting to do therapy or something like that. And, someone reading the application might think, okay, but you could do that as a psychiatrist. You could do that as a psychologist. You could do that as a nurse. You could, so why this type of profession specifically is going to be important. And if you have had prior experiences from coursework or shadowing or anything like that, so you can say that you understand what this field is all about, I think that's going to make your application stand out.
And somebody just added in the chat, which I think was very helpful. I would try to connect with someone already practicing in art therapy and see where it goes from there. I think that's helpful too.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a couple questions about how to get involved in research. What do you recommend? And I guess I can do a quick plug that Psych has some research opportunities. Check out our website.
So, if you are currently in an undergraduate program or a master's program, I would recommend reaching out to faculty members to see what type of research they're doing and see if you can get involved in their labs. They expect you to reach out to them. So you should be proactive about this. If you want to do clinical psychology research, try to find someone who's doing who's working with a clinical population, meaning a population that has some sort of diagnosis, not necessarily social psychology research. That's also fine. That's what I did. But the more clinical, the better in terms of you understanding what it's like to work with different populations and showing the graduate program that you've done this type of research specifically and you like it and it's what you want to do. If you're not, in a program currently where it's easy to make these kinds of connections, look around geographically to see where you are. Look at the universities, see who's doing something that's interesting, and reach out to them. I've had people reach out to me and just involve them in like a literature review that I'm doing. And then they can be, even if they can't be onboarded at my institution or I don't have like a position where they can hire them, they can volunteer to help with something like that. And then I can include them on a conference abstract and et cetera, et cetera. And you never know, one thing can sort of lead to another. And a lot of people are looking for volunteers to help right now because funding has been cut and things like that. And there are more and more opportunities to work virtually since so many people are doing that anyway, even when they're when the lab and the student are in the same place geographically. So cast a wide net.
Yeah, I would just add, if you're a person with a disability or hidden disability, the DARN, D-A-R-N Disability Network does connect students, undergrad and graduate students with research opportunities. Again, with Neurodiversity Foundation, and there's a couple more that I don't have at the top of my mind, but I'll be certainly able to and glad to pass that along. The other piece of it is if you are, someone who is of color, I work with Indigenous populations as well as, women of color. And there's a lot of professional organizations, Indigenous, Latino foundations that do connect students with research projects and, like mentor-mentee opportunities as well.
Thank you so much. Well, we are I wish we had so much more time because there's some questions we're not going to be able to get to. But I think with this, somebody just put in the chat that I'm going to ask you.
Can I answer that question?
Yes. I'm going to say with this last little piece, if you could all just provide like a 1 minute, just like final words of wisdom to the attendees. And somebody just put in the chat, if you got a chance to redo your path, what would you do differently knowing what you know now? If you want to say a couple words on that, I think
zero,
that would be really
nothing. Awesome. I would do exactly the way I did it because I've tried different career paths and none of them worked for me. And the moment I got on this path, everything just kind of clicked. And you can't put a price on that. And so, do I owe a lot of money? I owe a lot of money for school. And the path was hard. It was really hard. Burnout was high. I was this close to getting burned out, but I didn't. And now having my own private practice where I can do the work the way I want to do it, you can't put a price on it.
Thank you so much, DeMonta.
I think that in terms of words of wisdom, this is a really long path. And I think it's best if you know you really want what's at the other end of it. I mean, I did 4 years of undergrad. I worked as a research assistant for 2 years. I was in grad school for 6 years, and I was a postdoc for 4 years. That's a long time. Sometimes it unfolds more quickly, but that's not uncommon. And I think what kept me going was knowing that I really wanted what was at the other end. And I think to DeMonte's point, exploring other career paths too, so that you either figure out something else might be better for you, or it really reaffirms that even though this career path is not perfect, it is the best option for you or what you want to do most. I think that's really, really helpful. So I just encourage talking to a lot of people, understanding the pros and cons, and also understanding what the opportunity costs are and the trade-offs are of embarking on a path that involves so much training.
Thank you so much, Devika.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely going to say and agree with DeMonte. I wouldn't change anything just because I feel like life experiences and yes, there is accumulated debt with Psych and doing a dissertation, getting a PhD, all those things. But I think whether you had a linear path or you pivoted, life happened, things happened. I've been through a lot of things in my life, and I can say, honestly, those things build character. And I think at the end of the day, you can walk in and appreciate those experiences because they bring you to a place where, you can stand fully in yourself and the place that you have wanted to be. What's so great about psychology is the fact that, one thing I will say is you have to be a lifelong learner, right? You have to be somebody who is going to be continuously learning, continuously, you cannot stay stagnant. It is something that's going to continue to always evolve. And as Devika mentioned, it's a lifelong journey. It is something that you're going to have to pivot, change, and relearn and redo. But certainly it's not undoable. It is something that you can do. Just make sure that you explore it, right? You explore the path that you want to choose and network, really look at what is it that you need to succeed, right? Not just academically, the steps and stones and things that you need for that, but also for your own well-being. Particularly, I say this to anyone who has a disability, because I think those things are extremely important because it is a very rigorous, educational process.
Thank you so much, Itzel. And oh my goodness, thank you so much to our panelists. I'm feeling so enriched by the conversation and by the insights that you all shared. And I'm sure our attendees are as well. And to the attendees, I am cheering you on as you embark on this path. And I know our panelists are as well. I will be sharing the recording as well as the resources that the panelists mentioned in an email, probably within a week or so. I will quickly announce the raffle winners in a moment here, but first I just really want to say thank you again to our panelists. Your time, your generosity of time and insight has been so, so helpful. And I know everyone really appreciates it. I know I do. Attendees, let me quickly give you the raffle winners. Malia Lavoy, Isaac Ham, and Dahlia Sharif. I'll be sending you your gift card here soon by the end of the week. And I just want to say to everyone on behalf of Psi Chi, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for wanting to listen and learn. Panelists, thank you for sharing. And please visit psychi.org if you have any questions about general Psi Chi stuff. And like I said, I'll also be sharing a lot of resources in the follow-up email, as well as contact information for the panelists in whatever way they're willing to share. So thank you so, so much, everyone, for joining. I hope you all have a wonderful day. I hope we'll be able to connect soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.